Hello, today with you is Sabata Ramba on behalf of the Equatoria Advocacy Foundation. I am going to share with you a very short history of the making of Equatoria. Okay, has Equatoria been created? Has it evolved? Okay, what is it about Equatoria? Let me in a very precise manner run you through with this. Equatoria actually is a creation. It is not an evolution, and I will get to that. But what I would like to say is, Equatoria was created by a gentleman by the name of Samuel Baker. All right, and that was back in 18. Some accounts would say 1869, others would say 1870. Samuel Baker was hired by the Egyptians, okay, who were administering Sudan at the time. The Egyptians, after they occupied Sudan in 1821, they saw the furthest, well, they didn't infiltrate into the area of what is referred to as the Equatorial area, given the vegetation is very different. It's a vegetation that the Egyptians are not very familiar with, and they did not put any administration in that area. They used to refer to it as area unknown, okay? But then they hired Samuel Baker in 1870, for the sake of now, let's say 1870, to go and put an administration in that area. And Samuel Baker went into that area, first of all, called the territory Equatorial Territory. That territory is very close to the equator line, the imaginary line of 0 degrees, which is the equator. And everything closer to equator is described by the equator. That territory is described with a climate of the equatorial climate because it is surrounding the equator. The vegetation around that area is called the equatorial vegetation because it is surrounding the equator. Likewise, Samuel Baker figured out that the people around that area could be referred to as the equatorial people because they are also surrounding the equator. So he referred to those tribes, or those tribes that settled there, or those clans, those communities that settled there, as the equatorial people. Then, when he called those people the equatorial people, then eventually the area that those people settled was referred to as Equatorial Province of Egypt, because it was the Egyptian administration in Sudan, by the help of the Turks, of course, because remember, the Turks were protectors of Egypt at the time, and Egypt occupied Sudan with the help of the Turks, and then they formed an administration there. You can even call that administration Turco-Egyptians because the Turks also helped, all right? And now they have established that territory over there through Samuel Baker, called that place Equatorial People, Equatorial Territory, or Equatorial Area, or Equatorial Province of the Egyptian regime in Sudan. You see, that was the beginning of the creation. You know, it started by defining the people of Equatoria. Now, I'm going to summarize this. Samuel Baker died in 1874. Some accounts will say 1873. Let's go with 1874 for the matter. Died in 1874. Then Egyptians, that is the Khedive, decided to hire somebody by the name of Charles Gordon to come and run or administer the already formed province of the Equatoria, okay? And Charles came and occupied office around 1874, tried to combat slavery, failed. in 1876, Charles decided to quit the job. But what he did was he drew a very clear map, demographic. And then he did not retain the name of Equatorial province. But then instead he adopted a new name, Lado. Now, for this matter, I would like to hint that Samuel Becker, when he formed the province of Equatoria, he had his headquarters at a place called Gandokoro, but he couldn't call that right, and he called it Kondokoro. Okay? Now, when Gordon was hired, Gordon transferred the headquarters from Kondokoro to Lado. All right? So when Gordon was quitting, Gordon decided to put that map and referred to those people as the people of the Lado Kingdom, and then recommended to the Egyptians to administer that place separately. Did the Egyptians, and he gave some cultural reasons, 3 cultural reasons. Did the Egyptians administer the place separate? Heaven knows. Gordon left. Account in history says Gordon was called again to be governor in 1880. All right? Remember, at first he was hired governor only of that place, that province that was created, the province that was called Equatorial province. But then, when he was leaving, he drew the map of that place and said, this is Lado Kingdom, okay, and should be administered separate, okay, and that was in 1876 when he was leaving, when he was quitting as governor of that place. And then, when he was recalled, well, hold on, I'm not saying recalled, that is with the understanding of recalling ambassadors today. No, he was called again to perform a task, okay, to perform work in Sudan, but this time as governor of Sudan, not of that particular area, but of the entire Sudan. He came in 1880, all right? When he came in 1880, all right, when he came in 1880, guess what he did? He did just what he wanted to do, what he recommended to the Egyptians. He hired a separate governor for that territory, and that governor was called Amin. Some accounts will refer to him as Amin Pasha, other accounts will refer to him as Amin Bey. But he hired, imagine, Gordon was a governor, okay, but then he hired another governor, well, a governor who is an Egyptian, to administer that place, which he initially called it Lado Kingdom, which Samuel Becker formed it as the Equatorial province of the Egyptian regime. All right? What then happened is Gordon was killed in Khartoum by the Mahdists. There was a movement of the Mahdists sprang up, very heavy, very powerful, killed Gordon. Some accounts will say in 1884, some accounts will say in 1885. For now, let us just say in 1885. Gordon was killed. So when the Mahdists killed Gordon, now the Mahdists wanted to get Amin, who is also the governor of Gordon in the Equatoria. So as they started heading towards, remember Amin was in Lado? When they started heading towards that place, Amin left and went to a place called Durfil, which is right now in Ajumani, in Moya district, in Uganda. Okay, remember all that territory, there used to be no clear boundaries. Okay, and remember all these borders came after the Berlin Conference in 1885. Now we're basically talking around the same area, you see. So, Amin Bey left and went to Durfil. The Mahdists went after Amin, getting closer to Durfil. Amin, according to history, left Durfil and went and hid and was taken care of by the king of the Aringa tribe. And the Mahdists felt that Amin was now far enough. He is as good as dead. There is no need to pursue him. They returned, and then formed a base in Rajaf. They left some of their Ansars over there, forces over there. And that was it. And at this point, you got to remember, power of Egyptians over Sudan was over. Power of Egyptians over the equatorial area was over. Sudan was under administration of the Mahdists. They have a base in Rajaf where they put some few Ansars over there. What is happening to Equatoria? Equatoria has become a free agent, a free place where everybody, whoever is powerful, can occupy. Amin got a letter from the Khadif in 1886 giving a clear intent that they are abandoning Equatoria. They have already lost administration of Sudan. And remember, Equatoria was a province of the Egyptian regime in Sudan. So now, they have already lost Sudan. What are they going to do with Equatoria? They wrote a letter to Amin saying, we do not have any intention to maintain that area. We are abandoning it. Amin, after reading that letter, then wrote to the British that, hey, Equatorial is going to be a free agent. Egyptians are abandoning it. Are you interested? He got no answer from the British. But the British presumed authority on that area. Even though the British, after Egyptians have lost control of Sudan to the Mahdists, they themselves, the British, kind of became very relaxed, because after all, they were there. You know, when you see British personnel on that on those affairs, it was through the Egyptians, because at a point the Egyptians, remember in the beginning I said it was the Turks who were actually protectors of the Egyptians. At a point in history, the Turks were actually replaced by the British. The British became more of like the protectors of the Egyptians. So Egyptian interest on Sudan and the British on the top here. That's why you will see some personnel, sometimes some generals who are British by identity, are getting hired through the Khadif to perform certain tasks in the territory of Sudan, in the territory of Equatoria. You know, administration just went that way at the time. Equatoria became a free agent. Okay, nobody was occupying it. Now, British assumed their responsibility over that territory. Amin had to be rescued. An expedition was formed in 1886, and British were very reluctant to form that, to help in forming the expedition, by the way. But public opinion in Britain said, look, this is not fair. Last time when Gordon wanted help, when he was in Khartoum, an expedition was put in place late, and when the expedition arrived Khartoum, Gordon was already dead. Now Amin wants help. He is in the territory of nowhere, all right? And now he wants help, and now you are reluctant. That is not fair. So the British found themselves cornered to help Egyptians put a rescue team to come and rescue Amin. They came through Zanzibar, and then they used Congo Free State, this guy called Leopold II. We're going to bring him in later, and came and rescued Amin, and Amin was returned back to Cairo. That ended. Back to Equatoria. Remember, Gordon drew what is called the Lado Kingdom, right? And now that area is a free agent. In Rajaf, there were some few Ansars. In Sudan, you have the Mahadist administration. The Mahadist has not shown interest so much in the equatorial area. Guess who showed interest in the equatorial area? It was, hold on, the British had a project they wanted to run from South Africa to Cairo, all right? And that was around 1890, around 1893, 94, 95. Well, the person who was going to run the project died in 1896. I'm coming to that guy. His name is Cecil Rhodes. He was in South Africa. Now, British wanted to run a railway line to Cairo. But that railway line will eventually have to run through the Congo Free State. That is an area that is occupied by King Leopold II. So what did the British do? They said, hey, Leopold, we want a strip because we're going to run our railway line through this area. In exchange, we'll give you a territory. We have a territory here called the Lado Kingdom. Look at this territory. Tell us if you have any desire or interest over this territory and you think you can make a fortune, and we'll get into a deal. We'll get into an agreement and you will have that place. Guess what? Leopold took a place at that place and said, yes, I have an interest over these people. I can have them and you can have that strip. They reached an agreement. In 1894, it was called the British-Congolese Treaty of 1894, of which Lado Enclave, the territory of the Equatorians, the administration of it was handed over to this monarch king, Leopold II, who was running the Congo Free State, and Leopold is a Belgian, by the way. And then a strip within the Congo Free State was given to the British. Now an agreement has been formed. Imagine that agreement was happening even though the Ansars were sitting in Rajaf. The British just presumed that territory belongs to them, even though the Ansars were sitting in Rajaf. So what happened was, a deal was signed. Now, that territory of the Equatoria was typical or totally under control of the Belgian monarch, that King Leopold, who is actually a Belgian. It was he who called that area Lado Enclave. What is an enclave? An enclave is a piece of land with people who are cultured pretty much different from people of the mainland. Now you remember, so when he called those people enclave, it was because he saw the Congo Free State as the mainland. You have a land of the Uganda in the middle here, okay? Then you have the land of the Lado. So he felt Lado was an enclave of the Free State, Congo. That's why he called it the Lado Enclave. It is just like Alaska and USA. You can call Alaska the enclave of the USA, or you can say USA is an exclave of Alaska, because there is a territory, there is a land of Canada in the middle here that does not originally belong to USA, even though Alaska belongs to USA, but it is cut on the other side. For example, Madagascar and South Africa. Let me see. Is Madagascar an enclave of South Africa? That is, if this water body of the Atlantic Ocean was to be a land that belonged to some other people, then Madagascar will become an enclave of South Africa, or South Africa will become an exclave of Madagascar. You see. So that is why King Leopold called that territory Ladu Enclave. Now you have realized the kingdom has changed to exclave based on how King Leopold saw Ladu. Now he owns the administration of that place. He names it. So he named it Ladu Enclave. He administered that place. All right. In 1896, it was said, 1896, he did send the Ansars out of Rajaf. He had this gentleman by the name of Morton Stanley, who commanded those troops. They came in to rule Ibogo, and they even followed that route, okay, that came from from Juba all the way as you're going to Yei, and and then there's that road that goes to Aba, and then there's one that goes like that to Kaya, and then all the way to Uganda. They followed the same route. It wasn't something that different. It was the same route that they followed. And then the settlers, the Kakwa, the Pojulu, the Bari, had to help on carrying those ammunitions while those guys came with their chariots. You see, it happened. It is a history that our ancestors, not even, let me say, our grandfathers will talk to you about. You see, this is our history. We're talking about the Equatorian people here. So Morton Stanley came in, all right, and they came all the way to Rajaf. They kicked off the Ansars, and then he controlled the territory of the Equatoria, all right. He controlled it completely, starting from the agreement was agreed in 1894. He had it. He had that territory until 1910. Now I want you to think of this. From 1894 to 1910, that area was not under the British. That territory of the Equatoria from 1894 to 1910 was not under the British. It was under the Belgians. Okay. Well, Belgium authority had to take it over from that monarch, from this guy, Leopold, for certain reasons. Because he was very abusive. He used to be cutting hands of people and all that. So until 1910, that area was not run by the British. Even though there is a history that was going on the other side of what has been happening in Sudan. I will not touch that so that it will not confuse the history of the Equatorians. I will not touch that, all right? Because when you look at the Sudan, the way things were running on the other side, Sudan was under the Mahdists. The Egyptians did not have control over it. The British did not have much control over it. The French once decided they wanted to occupy it. Then the British came aggressively to protect Sudan because they had interest of the Nile, and they had to send Kitchener to come and occupy Sudan again. And then Kitchener came and started fighting in 1896. That was when already Equatoria was under the King Leopold, and in 1898 Sudan fell in the hands of Kitchener, who was a commander, all right, and I'm talking about 1898, and then in Sudan a condominium government had to be formed. All this time, all these incidences were happening in the absence of the Equatorians who were under the Belgians, all right, until 1910. Well, Leopold died in 1909. In 1910, the British then came to the Belgians and said, we are taking over the administration of that territory, the Ladu Enclave. We had an agreement here with Leopold, when he dies, we are taking over. That territory, administratively, we gave it to that gentleman, to that king. He died, we are taking it. Belgians kind of complained here and there, but there was an agreement. Now, Equatoria was taken back under the administration of the British in 1910. Now, I want you to remember, when the British brought in Equatoria, that was in 1910, they called it province of Mangala. They made Mangala the capital, okay? They had Equatoria in one hand. And now they had what is called condominium going on, because as I told you, history continued. They had some other incidences, British kind of on top of everything. Now they had condominium, an agreement between the Egyptians and the British, now having administration in Sudan, Tamamanen. On the other side, now they have taken control of the equatorial area in 1910 in their hands, all right? And they called it the province of Mangala, all right? Now, we are coming to the most interesting part here, or line here. The Egyptian, the English people around 1913 came up with an idea. They started consolidating. They started bringing together. Until 1910, when they were taking the administration, Equatorians did not see themselves as one, as whole. They were still scattered tribes and people who just lived in communities. But now when the British took administration of these people, they made certain programs. They started changing the structures of the Equatorians. They brought them together. They consolidated those tribes and formed what we refer to as the Equatoria Defense Force today. But that time, they called it the Equatoria Corps. They brought all those tribes. They started forming defense of the Equatoria. All right? And then what they did was, there's what is called the Christian Mission Society also, putting together schools, bringing all the communities in different schools. And then administrations, Muduriat, administrative areas were being formed, at different times. Now, formation, now Equatoria is getting formed. You see, now Equatoria is now getting formed. It's getting molded together. And I'm talking about Equatoria here, all right? And of course, the condominium is happening here, all right? Now, at a point, British have to start thinking. Now, time is going. We are approaching times when eventually independence have to be given, okay? One way or the other, these people will have to be given independence. These people will have to be given independence. Egyptians will have to leave, because now these people are going to start running themselves. Now, the question here is, are they going to be given independence separately? Are they going to be brought as one, And now that brings the British to start thinking back and forth. What do we do? Do they have capacities to run themselves? If they don't have capacities, and if we give them independence separately, who is going to be responsible in putting up some economic structures to strengthen economy in this amongst these people? British have to go through all this, thinking through this process. They ended up saying, no, we cannot give them separate independence. They have to be one. Because they themselves suffered a lot of economic damages towards the end of First World War. Remember, First World War started in 1914? And when did it end? All right? So around 1936. That was when it ended, if I'm not mistaken. So they also suffered economic damages. So they said, no, we cannot afford to give these people separate independence. All right, we have to give them. We have to give them independence as they are one. All right. So now it is now working us to what is called the Juba Conference. All right. The Juba Conference is going to be done in 1947. And you have the equatorial area, Mangala province, which eventually the name ended up getting back to what is called the Equatoria province. Now here, Sudan is here. All right. So time is going. We're going to come to what is called the Juba Conference, where these people are going to decide whether they want to be separate or just be one. So, oh man, now let us think. Where are the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and the people of Upper Nile? Huh? Where are the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and the people of Upper Nile all along this time? Have they been here with the Equatorians, or have they been here with the Sudan? Huh? Where are these people? Now, as we are thinking where the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and Upper Nile have been all along, well, during the Juba Conference, we knew that the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and the people of Upper Nile, together with the people of Equatoria, were in one side to decide whether they want to be with the North or they want to be separate. But when did they end up here? When did they end up on the same side with the Equatorians? A magic must have happened in the middle here. All this time, if Equatorians have been having their affairs run separate, even when they have been administered by the Belgians separate, there is no account of the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and Upper Nile with them. You know, the people of Bahar al-Ghazal and Upper Nile must have been here on the side of Sudan. But during the Juba Conference, how did these people end up being here with the people of Equatoria? This opens up another question. When did that line, when did that merger happen? I'm going to explain that in my next video. I'm calling this video video 1, and I'm going to explain it in video 2. Allow me to continue, because this is typical history of the Equatoria. I am not going to get into that. All right. So yes, Equatoria, through those programs, you have now been formed to be who you are today. And then we know very well, we went through the 1955, the Anyanya War, which called for separation of the Southerners. Of course, at that time, we were already Southerners. We were no longer Equatorians, but Southerners now, including the people of Upper Nile and Bahar al-Ghazal. And I've explained to you, I'm going to include that discussion on my video 2, how we ended up coming together. And basically we called for separation of the South, and then, you know, politics. As things went tougher, confederation, and things went tougher, federalism, and things went tougher. People settled in Anyanya, in Addis Ababa agreement with what is called the regional autonomy, which ended up breaking down after 11 years in 1983, and people lost the regional autonomy, and again people went back to another fight of the SPLM, which you all know what the fight of the SPLM, how it started and how it ended up to the autonomy of South Sudan. Let me leave it here. In video 2, I am going to explain how South Sudan got formed. In this video 1, I've just explained how Equatoria got formed. In video 2, I would explain how South Sudan got formed. All these are creations. They are not evolutions. Things did not just happen merged in maybe because of some economic factors or something. No, it was a creation. All right, planned and then executed. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have enjoyed this short video. You all know my name is Sabata Ramba. If anybody has any different opinion or questions, call me and we'll discuss much about the creation of the Equatoria people and the Equatoria demographics, what is called the Equatoria region today, and how all those tribes assimilated and became Equatoria. Thank you very much. God bless you.